Hey everybody, I haven't made a video in a long time, so, well, at least a little bit over a month or so. I kind of been giving up on the whole YouTube thing, I don't know. But I had some time. It's a Sunday afternoon. I don't have a lot of things to do at the moment, so I figured, as you can see, I'm still in the middle of putting my bed back together after washing my sheets, so sorry about the disarray or whatever. I was just eating lunch and I was watching a couple of reaction videos to Rick Beato's video on why music's terrible now, or I can't remember the exact title. I'm not going to bring the video up. I'm not going to bring up the people who are responding to the video either. I was just listening to different people. Some people are very against what he says. Some people are very for what he says, and some people are kind of in between. I guess I would say I'm an in-between. I know I'm kind of an in-between guy just across the board, whether it's anything, politics, blah, 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 I'm always kind of in-between. I don't really agree with anybody. I just agree with myself. So I encourage people to disagree with me because I'm speaking from myself subjectively, but this is my take on it, and I felt maybe I should say something, so I figured I'll make a video. I haven't made one in a while. This is for me, and this might relate to a lot of people, but I find that, first of all, music is a young person's game. Whether it's, now obviously that's not, it's a little hyperbolic, because sure, there's composers out there, in their 80s, there's, blah, 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 blah. I'm talking about, like, rock music, which is dead. It's kind of coming back, whatever. This is talking about pop music. Maybe not country. I'm not really into country. Actually, I'm not into country at all. Let me put that back. I'm also not into hip-hop or rap. I pretty much like what I like as a, I just turned 51, so, do the math. You can tell the stuff that I grew up on. It's a young person's game. All of the stuff, I'm wearing a Ghost shirt. I mean, even Ghost is old. They're, what, 14? Their last album was 14 years ago, almost 15 years ago. I mean, that's literally like saying, when I really got into Rush in 1987, I knew who they were, but I really got into them because I got invited to a concert. I've told this story before. And I really got into Rush. Well, it was 1987. Their first album was 1974. So, again, do the math. They were actually, well, let's see, it would have been 13 years. Yeah, they're like an even younger band than, say, Ghost is now. So, I like the band, but I mean, they're not a good example because they're not new. And even talking back in, like, 1987, talking about a band from 1974, whether it's Kiss, Blue Oyster Cult's a little, I always mention the bands I like, but a little older than that. But a lot of the bands that are turning 50 this year, in 2024, a lot of them were old in the 80s. I mean, at least by 10 plus years. So, and that's how I've always been. I mean, for the most part, unless I was really young. Now, like I said, I also have most of my music that I like it because I like it, and it's probably 90% nostalgia. All of it takes me back to a time. I got into Kiss in kindergarten in 1978 when the Kiss the Phantom of the Park movie was on TV. Kiss Alive 2 was out. Before solo albums had come out. Pretty much the end of Kiss, because they kind of, started to break up with each other, or, started to get pissed off at each other, or starting. They're probably more than that. But anyways, what I'm saying is Kiss was kind of like at the height of their game in 78, and that was right about the time they were ready to fall as well. I'd say the height of their game is probably, some people say it's a Live 1. I would say it's somewhere in between the Live 1 and the Live 2. They're king of the world. And here's the thing. What are people actually talking about? What's music is good nowadays? Because really, Kiss is not that great of a band. They're a little bit simplistic, which is why I like them, because I can play the stuff because it's not that hard. Um, they're a great show band. They've got a gimmick that, to a kindergartner was very appealing. And to this day, as you can see, I still have Kiss stuff. That's not an original doll. It's a reissue. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I grew up on this stuff, and that stuff impacted me at a young age. And then fast forward to say that when I was 10, it's 1983, and MTV is the craze, right? So the first 10 years of my life, a lot of music, that's pretty much the formative years for me in music. And then, of course, I knew about Rush, but I really got into them in the second 10 years of my life. From 11 to 20, I got into Yes at that time, and old Yes. I never had liked, for the most part, contemporary music. New music. Let's not say contemporary music. New music. I never really got into about the only bands I kind of liked when I was young that were new were maybe some of the heavy metal bands from the early 80s, like Def Leppard, which they weren't super new at the time, Quiet Riot, stuff like that would come out. I guess that was contemporary or was new music at the time. But the thing is, it didn't take me long into my teenage years to realize I don't really like that stuff. It sounds, something about it I didn't like. I mean, I liked Iron Maiden. That was about the only band that I kind of liked because I got into them in '83. Peace of Mind. But as you can see, I liked a certain type of music. Cheap Trick, another one of my favorite bands. I liked a certain type of music, and it's completely subjective. None of my friends, for the most part, I met some friends later on that were into the music I like, but when I was in junior high, high school, nobody liked the music I liked. They like, that stuff's so old, or that stuff's stupid. Kiss is stupid. Kiss is cheesy. They're stupid. This is in the 80s, people were saying this. Blue Oyster Cult, who the hell is that? Rush, everybody liked Rush, kind of, sort of, well, to a certain extent. Everybody loved Moving Pictures, the album. And then, I got into Yes. People like, what the hell are you listening to? That's some weird 70s crap. That's what people used to say when I was a teenager in the 80s. So going into my 20s in the 1990s, I still hated new music, and that's when rock was starting, that rock, the hair metal or whatever I'm going to call it, was starting to die. So I didn't like that in the 90s. I hated grunge. I hated the music that was out. I didn't like, any of that. Smashing Pumpkins, Pearl Jam, Nirvana. Did not like Nirvana. I didn't like any of that stuff. I only really liked the stuff that I had kind of locked into, and I locked into, like I said, Rush, Blue Oyster Cult, Cheap Trick, Kiss, old Kiss, not unmakeup Kiss, and arguably, obviously, Rush was good music, and it was well done. But I liked the rocky stuff. I mean, I didn't like the electric stuff from the 80s as much. So, what I'm trying to say is, I never liked contemporary music for the time, and I am extremely narrow-minded when it comes to my preference for music. So when people say stuff like today, like, oh, music's a lot worse than it is. Guess. I would agree. Pop music seems to not be as appealing as the pop music in the '80s, which you couldn't help but hear because it was on the radio constantly, on MTV all the time. You could not know that stuff. But I wasn't going to go out and buy the Tina Turner album. I wasn't going to go out and buy, a lot of albums that were popular at the time. And then going into the 2000s, right, I really wasn't going to go out and buy, Pearl Jam's new album or Nevermind, and as the 2000s kind of rolled on, and grunge seemed to be pretty short-lived because they kind of died out, I think, by the end of the 90s. I think grunge was dead. And then the 2000s sparked up. I didn't like Nickel. I hated Nickelback. I hated all the new metal, whether it was Limp Bizkit, Korn, all that crap. Couldn't stand it because it wasn't my music. It was young people's music, and I was older at the time. So if people like what they like when they're young and impressionable, and it usually sticks with them the whole time. People are talking about, oh, the Beatles were great. Well, yeah, how old were you in the Beatles? Well, I was in high school. Or I was a little bit younger than high school. I was in junior high, right? It's, oh, I love the 70s. I love Led Zeppelin. How old were you when they made it big? I was junior high school. My dad turned 40 in 1983. He's 30 years older than me. He's no longer with us, but he didn't, he would listen, watched me at whatever, in his 30s, with Kiss records out and wanting to go to the Kiss concert at the Silverdome in 79. My dad's like, he's like, this is not the Beach Boys. My dad loved the Beach Boys, he loved Moody Blues, and he loved the Rolling Stones. His 3 favorite bands. And he's like, and that stuff wasn't that old at the time. 79, the Beach Boys, it was only like talking about with Ghost 15 years later. It was only 15 years later in 79 than the British invasion of the Beatles. So all that stuff is still relatively new. But that's the stuff, he was in high school in the, he would have graduated high school in 61. So, the late 50s into the 60s, he's 20 in 63, so right about the time the Beatles hit, and the Rolling Stones and all those bands. So he did kind of like music a little bit past high school, where I didn't. Like I said, there's certain bands that pop up here and there that speak to me, and I kind of latch on to those. But by far, those are all my favorite albums. I've got about that many up here on the other shelf. This is my secondary shelf. My secondary shelf is for I like the bands, but they're not as good as my favorite bands. And as I said, that's Blue Oyster Cult, that's Kiss, that's Cheap Trick, that's Rush, that's Yes, that's, what else is in there? A bunch of those bands are in there. Can't remember who else was in there. My favorite bands, can't remember who they are. There's just a couple other oddball albums in there. But, like I said, so I never liked that stuff when I was young. As far as I never liked stuff that was coming out, like when I graduated in 91. So Nevermind came out in 91. I hated all the music that had been out for those 4 years I was in high school. Didn't like any of it. I guess the only one I kind of liked the Hysteria album by Def Leppard, but they weren't a new band. And I liked Somewhere in Time in Seven Sun by Iron Maiden. But again, those weren't new bands. Those bands have been around for a while. But anybody who came out with a new, like a debut album or like their big hit breakthrough album that came out in those time I was in high school, I didn't like any of it. I'm just trying to think, is there anything? I don't think there is. I can't not think of a band that I really latched on to. I already had made up my mind in high school what I was going to like for the rest of my life. And I was like, you know what, unless something comes along, like a band like Ghost or something like that kind of like speaks to me, I'm kind of done listening to new music. And I think a lot of people are in the same boat. I might have mentioned this in another video, but I had to go to a sales pitch when I worked for a company. In the sales rep there, he was trying to tell us how to sell stuff, and he said, and he used music as an example. It wasn't what we were selling, but he said, look at music. He says, most people don't really listen to any music past high school unless they're really into music. Like an audiophile or aficionado. But most average people, Joe Schmo, Joe Sixpack, whatever, Sally something, whatever. Just average people probably aren't really going to be into, really latch on to music past high school. And if they are, they're either really into music or they're just, I guess pop music, a lot of girls in their 20s, I don't really think going to the club's a big thing anymore. Just seems like club thing's kind of dying, but girls would, it's like, I remember in the 90s, I was in my 20s, and girls that were like my age and older were like, they loved the Alanis Morissette album because it really spoke to them. So there are certain stuff that people still after 20, but by and large, most of the stuff they liked was from high school back. And so what he said was true, and he said that the average age of people is getting older right? And this is kind of before the, well, this is, I mean, the boomer boom, not boomer, the millennial boom, I guess, was still in that phase. Because here's the other thing that it's weird to think about too, is I know everybody talks about the boomers, you know, the stuff from the 60s, you know, that boomer music, right, 60s and 50s. But stuff from the 70s and 80s, that's Gen X music. And I didn't know this because I didn't really look up the demographic. I didn't realize that the two biggest generations that exists today, and the boomers are dying off, but the largest demographic were the boomers. You know, I'm talking about boomers that, you know, have passed away as well, that would still be alive but grew up in that time period. The boomers were huge, much bigger than the greatest generation before them. Then there was Gen X, and Gen X is a very small generation because there weren't that many kids being born. There was a huge boom when the millennials, you know, came along. So that's they're I don't know if they're bigger. I think they're even bigger than the boomer generation as far as sheer amount of, you know, new people in the world. So Gen X got smushed into this little category. Most of the people who are crying wolf, myself included, I'm not really crying wolf, but I mean most of the people that are talking about this are Gen Xers, most of them. I would say maybe, or some older millennials, or some very young boomers. Rick Beato being a younger boomer. You know, my dad was born in 43. I think Rick Beato's what, like 60 or 61? So he's 20 years younger than my dad was alive today, he'd be 81. So I think Rick Beato's 61, so he's 20 years younger than my dad. So he's like the very tail end of the boomers. Because my sister's 59 now, and she's the first year Gen X, born in 65. So, like I said, the very young boomers, and the very young millennials kind of shared that gap with the Gen Xers. And what was my point about that? I can't remember. But again, here's the other thing too, is it's hard for somebody like my age to really get into new music, and this is why. Unless something really hits you in the right spot. This is why I don't like to go see my favorite bands that still play. I don't want to see them old. I don't want to see Kiss old. I don't want to see Rush old. I don't want to see Cheap Trick old. I want to remember these bands in their prime, right? And when they were in their prime, they were young. They were in their 20s, and maybe early 30s at the most. But literally, they were in their 20s. And that's how I want to remember those bands. And that's when I really liked those bands, was when those bands were in their 20s. Whether I was 6 years old in kindergarten, whether I was, I was in my 20s. You know, I could still get, in the 90s, I could still go to a Rush concert, even though I didn't like any album arguably after Moving Pictures. But I've just come to that realization. I liked some of the stuff in the 80s from Rush, but I'm really starting to realize I don't like anything past Moving Pictures. So, even though I went to a bunch of Rush concerts in the 90s, I really didn't really like the new music. Same thing with Cheap Trick, same thing with Blue Oyster Cult. Which really didn't even have a new album though. And I did not go see Kiss during the 90s when they did put the makeup back on. I remember friends that did. I never got to go see it at the Palace, which is gone now, but I never got to see them. But that probably would have been okay because they weren't that old at the time. They were still, I've seen videos of them. They still seem like they kind of had it. But the final concerts that they did, like the Garden and stuff, oh God. That is unbearable to watch. You know, watching Ace Frehley play on his tour, he's out, you know, now and promoting his new album. I've said what I've said on that in the other videos if you go back and watch them, but I am, it's unbearable for me. I like to remember these bands when they were young. And I liked these bands when I was young. And I don't want to go out and see a bunch of young people when I'm old because it makes me feel old. Does that make any sense? So, you know, like I said, Ghost. I mean, I think Ghost, they're in their 40s-ish. So they're not much younger than me, and they're okay to go see. And like I said, they wear costumes and masks. You can barely tell what they look like anyways. So I don't really mind them so much because they're hiding the fact that they're younger than me. I don't feel like an ancient dinosaur when I watch them or listen to them. But if you go to a band where it's like, oh, I remember seeing these guys when they were young and they're old and I'm old. And if you watch a band that are really young, let's say they're in their 20s now, and you're as old as I am, you're like, I want to see these young people. It makes me feel old. It don't matter how many rock T-shirts you get, or how many toys you buy, or how much you try to stay like you're like a teenager for the rest of your life. It's all fake. It's all a facade. I'm not trying to really cover up for anything. I'm just being me. Maybe I am trying to feel young again. That's why I still even talk about this stuff in the first place. But again, so I think it's hard for us older people. I would really like to listen to. What's funny is there hasn't really been that many reaction videos by people who are in their 20s, who are talking about, or their teens even, that are talking about music today. Like, do you think music today is great? I think most people in their teens and 20s probably like most of it. I mean, they're probably weirdos like me that are like, no, I like everything from the 80s and the 90s because I don't like today's music. There are those weirdos, because I was one of those weirdos. But the average person, the average 20-year-old, ask them go to a college. They always go to colleges and ask 20-year-olds just to basically make them look stupid. I hate those videos. It's just, what are you trying to do? So anyways, but watch those videos, or go watch a video, or see if there's people that's like talk about, like, hey, do you think music today sucks? And what they would say. And if anybody's watching this who's that old, which is probably not, because they don't want to watch an old guy like me, what do you think? Do you think it sucks? Have you gone back and listened to old music and thought this stuff's better? I mean, if I was to go listen to like stuff from the 50s, I did like some of it. Because my dad would play it. I always have the oldies station on when we were in the car when I was a kid. And, so he would I listened to the Beatles. I listened to stuff that was considered older at the time. But I always thought to myself, it sounds old, right? I've appreciated it as I've grown older, and I've looked at it differently, listened to it again and again and again. I realized, a lot of this stuff's really good. But at the time, as a young person, I was like, I want to listen to the new whatever. If it was 1983, I would have said, I want to listen to Quiet Riot, Iron Maiden, and Def Leppard. If you fast forward to the late 80s, I'm in high school, it's like, I just want to listen to Rush, which was kind of old. And I wanted to listen to Yes, which was kind of old. But I know it seems weird. It doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense what I'm talking about. But I'm trying to convey best I can off the top of my head, because this video is literally off the top of my head. No preparation. Is what I think about this. And the whole thing with quantization and making modern music, all this machinery making modern music can still be open-hearted, to quote Rush, which that was 1979 when he said that in that album. Yeah, just make good stuff, I guess. I mean, there are bands out there that are making good music. They might not be super popular. I mean, how popular really is Cheap Trick? How popular is Blue Oyster Cult? People have heard of them because they had a couple of big songs. But does anybody really know the band? Are they really that popular? Go to an average person my age and say, hey, you like Blue Oyster Cult? Oh, Don't Fear the Reaper. Anything else? Oh, they have a song called Burnin' for You? Yeah, you know anything else? No. Cheap Trick. Oh yeah, they got that song, I Want You to Want Me, or back in the 70s at the concert, because people have seen that video. Or it's like, oh, they have that song in the 80s where they're playing the acoustic guitar. Yeah, what's it called? I don't know. But I remember that song. Does anybody remember those bands? Cheap Trick had some video. I mean, some of the stuff was on MTV. Rush had videos on MTV. But they weren't super popular. They were still kind of underground, really. I mean, You know, this is before the internet. This is before everybody was talking about everything and everybody was going back and, you know, listening to Spotify. And again, getting into the Spotify dealio. I like having records. I always have. You know, I got into CDs in the 90s because that was just the thing to do. And I have gotten rid of all my CDs. And have gone back to getting records again. And I'm trying to find a fad or anything. It's just that I had a lot of good records in the 80s and late 80s that all got, you know, sold off in a garage sale. And it's just like, I want those back. I wanted my Kiss doll back. You know, I wanted my you can see some Transformers up there. My Secret Wars comic there. That's not, it's 40 years old. And I just got a poster for that. So, I mean, I want a lot of the stuff that I had that made me happy. I want it back because I'm old now and I want to feel happy again. Maybe I want to feel young. It's not that I want to feel young. I just want to feel happy. And, you know, there aren't that many bands that are new that come along that are really, that, you know, really do it for me. I mean, I got all the Ghost albums. You know, I've learned to play some of the Ghost stuff on the guitar. I like it. But, you know, that's pretty much, if I'll buy most of their catalog or try to get most of their catalog and I try to learn the music on my guitar, that's a good indicator that I really, the music, I identify with the music and the music has resonated with me. The Sword, I don't have any of their albums yet. I still have them on my wish list. I haven't gone out and purchased them, but The Sword was a band I kind of hit me, and they're obscure, and they broke up. They're old. They were around since the 2000s. I liked Wolfmother. I liked a certain sound, and maybe those bands were trying to emulate the 70s, and yes, they probably were. And even Ghost, to some extent, they're emulating a lot of different sounds that have already come and gone. And that's the other thing. I say this in How much time are we at? Oh, we haven't been talking that long. In correlation with bad movies, think about, let's say, like heavy metal, right? Think about it, and one person kind of started to touch on this in one of the videos, the reactions to Beato's video, but what do you call it? What was I saying? Forgot. Bad movies, right? A lot of like cheesy B movies from the 80s, right? You'd watch them, you'd get around with a bunch of friends, and you'd rent, you know, you're hoping there's some TNA in it, you know, it's a bad horror movie like Chopping Mall, or Night of the Comet, you know, bad B cult movie, right? I'm a firm believer that the people who made those movies in the 80s, or, you know, because that's when a lot of them were made, they weren't trying to make bad movies. They weren't self-aware that their movies were going to be bad. Maybe some of them were. Maybe they figured, you know, this isn't really going to fly. You know, it's not going to get major distribution. But I think people were trying to make actual real movies. Because if you watch, like, movies that were big, like, especially like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, the quality of them watching them now isn't much better than some of those B movies that seemed like Silent Night, Deadly Night. They were trying to make a movie, you know, or what's another one? My Bloody Van. I'm thinking of horror movies. A lot of horror. There's a lot of bad B movies. I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know, a classic. I don't think they were trying to specifically make a bad movie. I think they were trying to make a good movie, and they wanted to make money. But nowadays, if you go to like Netflix and you see all of these bad B movies, these like straight-to-video movies and stuff like that, they're all self-aware that they know what they are, and therefore they don't come across as being genuine. And you watch them, it's just like, you know, I don't know why watching like a really terrible actress, you know, topless hopefully, in a movie in the 80s. I don't know why to me she's less abrasive than watching, like, maybe because she's older than me when I was young, and maybe it goes back to the same theory of music. You know, and then you watch a girl who's 30 years younger than I am, or 25 years younger than I am, and she can't act, and she's just, you know, maybe she gets nude in it, I don't know. She becomes abrasive, I don't know. Again, maybe I'm going on a tangent here, but But my whole thing is the people who are making these movies, I think, are self-aware. This is exactly what we're doing. We're making schlock, cheesy, low-budget movies that we can throw out on Netflix or whatever streaming service. And I feel it's the same way with like heavy metal, or metal as they call it nowadays. Everybody just called it rock back then. I think we sort of started to call it heavy metal into the to the late '80s. But for the most part, it was just rock. It was just what was on. It was rock music. Some people called it heavy rock, or hard rock. Hard rock, a lot of people called it. I mean, they named a bar, the Hard Rock Cafe, after it. But bar, restaurant, whatever. But anyways. Nowadays people are self-aware. They're all trying to take the last 40 to 50 years worth of heavy metal, and they're trying to one-up it by making it crazy or whatever. I think the whole death metal and all that stuff, which I cannot stand, I think all that stuff kind of came out of, let's make this even heavier. We want to be heavier than Metallica, or heavier than Black Sabbath, or heavier than Judas Priest. So, the only way to make it heavier is to tone the guitars really far down and then speak and just, whatever that is, do that through a song. It's just like, really? I can't listen to much more than 5 minutes of that. I'm like, fuck this, I'm turning it off. Yeah, so I think it's the same with the music. I think that people now are self-aware. They've got so much music to kind of emulate and try to do different. And when people do different things, it sometimes it falls flat, sometimes it resonates with people. I mean, the Ghost is Ghost not really just kind of redoing what like Merciful Fate or like the guy looks like King Diamond, ish. They got costumes on, they got masks on. Aren't they essentially just Kiss? Aren't they Kiss and Merciful Fate with a little bit of a Def Leppard sound thrown into it? I mean, that's all it really is, but it's presented in a different package. So, I don't know. It doesn't, to Rick Beato's question, and try to tie this up in a knot, or a bow, or whatever. Does music suck nowadays? To me, yeah. There's a few nuggets, but for the most part, most music sucks. If you were to ask me the same question in 1987 when I was a freshman in high school, and said, "Hey, do you think today's music sucks?" I went, "Yeah." I might not have said it in '83, when I was 10. I might have said, "Oh no, I like Def Leppard and Iron Maiden, and I like Quiet Riot. I like that stuff then when I was 10. But if you were to come back to me when I'm a little more cynical, I've gone through puberty, and being the rebellious, angsty teenager in high school, and you asked me, "Do you think music today sucks?" I would say, "Yeah." Yeah. What do we have? Ice Baby. We had She Drives Me Crazy. I mean, we had, Let's Hear It for the Boy. Some really bad stuff. And they're just like, oh God, it just rolled my eyes at most of it, We had the rap and hip hop started to become popular. I didn't mind bands like Run DMC. I thought Run DMC were kind of cool, just because they looked cool, and they were just kind of, king of rock, and they were kind of like belting it out. I thought that was kind of cool, but for the most part, I didn't really like into that. And then when Vanilla Ice came along, I was like, I just rolled my eyes. What the hell is going on? And then there's people that started dressing like Vanilla Ice, and when I was in high school, and it's just like, And then there's, then there's people into, whatever was popular at the time. And then, as I graduated in '91, that's when everything started to turn grunge, and everybody's listening to Smashing Pumpkins and who else? Pearl Jam, Nirvana, all that stuff, and I was just like, I really didn't like that either. I kind of liked Faith No More was okay to me. I liked Primus just because they're weird, and I liked, Geddy Lee. Yeah, Geddy Lee. I liked Les Claypool in the bass, but when I go back and really listen to a lot of Primus today, I'm like, I like Sailing the Seas of Cheese, which came out in '91, by the way. And maybe Pork Soda, and I'm like, and I didn't like all of that, so I don't really like maybe an album and a half of Primus, and I really don't like slap bass. I just thought what he was doing was kind of cool at the time. I really liked the Jerry Was a Race Car Driver song. So, but White Zombie with the Thunder Kiss, that was out right around that time. I just remember I hated the whole Lollapalooza thing. Just drove me bananas. And I remember we had this record store downtown. This was when I was buying CDs, and everybody down there was like these like quasi hippies, like these. I guess you would call them like the woke, crowd today, or the young people of today that a lot of people are like roll their eyes at, right? Were the same young people, and those young people I'm talking about are still Gen Xers because they were, my age, or maybe a little bit younger, a little bit older in the 90s, but they're all like, going to Lollapalooza, and everybody's acting like a deadhead, and it's like, oh, we're all stoned and we're all hippies again. You're right. So I didn't like that then, and that was the 90s, and that was 30 some years ago. So I guess maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just an asshole and I just hated everything. I mean, it's definitely a possibility, obviously. I'm not so delusional that I can't admit that I'm kind of an asshole when it comes to my stuff. And I really was very antisocial, and I really didn't get along with a lot of my peers when I was young. So I'm probably not the best person, most qualified person to give a truly unbiased opinion on modern music. Like I said, I mean, I'm going to tell you music sucked from 87 forward. I'm a firm believer, and I agree that music died with 1991 when I graduated high school. Nirvana's Nevermind. I think Nirvana's Nevermind broke music. They broke rock, definitely. Broke guitar-driven music. It broke it. And it hasn't recovered. It hasn't been able to be repaired since, in my opinion. So, coming, like I said, listen to Rick Beato. I'm sure Rick Beato doesn't think that way. I'm sure, some of these people that were commenting on his video, I'm sure they didn't hate music 30 years ago. Only like a finite amount of weird eclectic bands that they kind of put together, and they hated everything else. I'm sure those people weren't those kind of people. So maybe I'm not qualified to respond on them. Maybe they are. Maybe they are, because they still liked music after high school, if they're in their 40s and 50s, right? Or 60s. But maybe I'm not the right person. But I wanted to mention it anyways, just because I haven't made a video in a long time. I wanted to blab. Hey, it's Sunday afternoon, let's blab. So, what do you guys think? If you see this video, which will probably be 13 people for the next month until I make another video, I might get 14 views. I might pick up one. I'll probably lose 3 subscribers. They're probably all Kiss people. Like, oh, I just love Kiss. If you're not talking about Kiss, I'm out of here. Just another weird thing I like to talk about. I'll talk about that later. But yeah, I guess the gloves are off. I'm not going to candy coat anything anymore. I'm just going to tell you how I think. And if it pisses people off, it pisses you off. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic for clicks, because I don't get clicks. Trust me. Look at my numbers. I don't get clicks. So if you want to comment, or you want to give me your 2 cents, what you think, hit me up. Let me know. Put it in the comments. Whatever. Start a conversation. Maybe if enough people come back, maybe I'll start making more videos and more often. But the last video I tried to make a month ago, I literally got halfway. I'm surprised I got through this one. I got through halfway through the video, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm done. And I just turned off the camera, and I was like, I don't have nothing to say. So I feel like I had something to say today. Whether or not it's useful information, I'll just throw it out there into the internet world and see how it does. But for me, I'm just going to continue to listen to all my favorite albums, and my not as favorite albums, and I'll still get albums here and there eclectically, but I'll still continue to play the same old songs that I want to either get better on, or learn the same old songs on my guitars and have fun. Oh, by the way, I did get another Leo James. Maybe I'll make a video on that, because I guess I made one on the first one. Might as well make one on the second one. But I'll do that. I'll show you real quick. This guy here. I'll make a video on that, I guess, later. But for now, you know, what do you think about Rick Beato's statement? What do you think about the people that are responding? What do you think about the question in general? You know, does music today suck? Or why is it music today suck? Or does it suck? You know, especially I'd love to get somebody, you know, high school age or just out of high school, college age, and ask them what they think about modern music and, you know, what their verdict is on it, you know. And sure, maybe, you know, I guess I'm kind of speaking at the cloud here because, you know, the only people who are going to watch this would be people that are really into music, that would listen to anything that this stuff's going to show up in their feed anyways. And those people are like myself, are kind of not qualified. I went to like the average Joe Schmo or the average Jane Schmaine, whatever, to comment, you know, on that age. Do you like this music? I try to ask young people when I'm out. I mean, my son's 12, and me 13. We won't even get into my son and I's relationship with music because that's a little oddball to begin with. You know, we both, he loves music, I love music, he likes his thing, you know, which I like most of the things he likes, and he likes some of the things that I like. But I just put it this way, nothing my son is listening to for the most part is new, except internet guitar players, which I guess that should be a whole separate video, is talking about internet guitar players. And one of the issues I have with my son I mean, he's amazing, but, you know, as a lot of people, you know, the average 14-year-old can out-shred Eddie Van Halen, right? Because of the internet and because of the way things are nowadays. However, most of them aren't making great music, you know. You know, I'm not saying my son's still, you know, he's starting to dip his toe into recording, but I'm just saying, like, the average person isn't making that great. There's a few people here and there. They're making some interesting stuff. Polyphony comes to mind. I don't really like that rickety-doo, you know, whatever it is, that ting tang walla walla bing bang on the guitar sound that he does, or that they do. But it definitely is something new that hasn't been done before, and I can see why people kind of latch onto it. But is it going to stick around? I don't know. It seems kind of gimmicky, but, you know, again, sometimes gimmicks last. But look at Kiss. The gimmick lasts for a pretty long time. Alright, sorry. I'll end the video. I wanted to try to keep this under an hour, coming up on 42 minutes. So let's end it here. Alright, like I said, like and subscribe, do all that stuff. Let me know that you're watching the videos, blah, blah, blah. You know, because I'm going to check this video in a month, and I'm going to see 13 views on it. Mark my words. That, or it's just going to blow up because I'm touching on some current thing that everybody who's watching the reactions to Rick Beato is going to see my video, and they're going to get 5 minutes into it and go, this guy's video sucks. It's like no quality to it. But I'll get a view out of it, though. So maybe I'll get like 1.3 thousand views in a month, and then it'll stay at 1.3 thousand views for all of eternity. Whatever. Anyways, I'll catch you guys on the next one, whenever that may be. All right, bye-bye.